What's up, everybody? Welcome to our final day of live coverage from E3 2018, but it's still a full day of game demos. I'm Damon Hatfield. I'm here with Derek Bradley, who is creative director on a game called Ashen. Welcome to the IGN stage.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for kicking off our final day of coverage over here.
It's an honor.
Okay, Ashen was unveiled last year at the Xbox briefing, is that right?
Actually, in 2015, we were at the Xbox briefing, but we were lucky enough to get featured again last year, yeah.
Cool. So, remind us what your game is.
Sure. So, from the ground up, Ashen's an action RPG. It is set in a big open world with stamina-based combat, so there's that kind of high-risk, high-reward, animation-driven combat, as well as it having passive multiplayer. So our passive multiplayer works in a way where players don't necessarily need to go into lobbies or anything like that to connect. All you do is kind of run around the world and someone else will just run past you. If you decide that you want to play with them, you stick together. And if you don't, you kind of just run away from each other. And in the background, it'll find another person to play with you. Kind of just as in this demo right here, there are two players. If they turn around and you see the other guy kind of joining in and fighting the bad guys together.
So who are we? We create our character in the beginning, is that right?
Yeah, you absolutely create your character from the start, so you can customize how you look and all that sort of stuff. The general story behind Ashen is that the world doesn't have a natural source of light as such, or there's no sun in this world. So the way that light has come to the world is through a phoenix-like creature. So the phoenix-like creature is called an Ashen, and it's this giant bird which in ages past fell onto the dark plains where your world is set and died. And in its last 3 breaths were the first 3 ages of light that happened within this world. But it eventually died and the world receded back into darkness. And what you're seeing here with like this explosion right here in our tutorial section is the first like glimpse of light that anybody's seen in this world for like thousands of years, so nobody even remembers what it is like to be in a lit world. And what's happening for your player is you're trying to find out what the light is, how to protect it, how to stop the forces of darkness that want to essentially return the world to its natural state of darkness.
Interesting. That's pretty metal.
Yeah.
That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Okay, so you create your character and you start off in this open world action RPG adventure, but there are other players there in the world with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you don't know, like they're also NPCs, right? So how do you know who's a real player?
That's an interesting question. So to dive a little bit deep on that, essentially what happens in Ashen is that in multiplayer, you role-play an NPC for other people. So
interesting.
Take the NPC that we have here at the start who's running along with our player. That's a treasure hunter-themed NPC we have. And if I happen to be on his quest, so I'm tracking his quest and seeing quest markers for him, and he's given me a quest, asked me to go and do something. When someone else hops into multiplayer with me, they'll actually look like him. So it's as if the person who's given you the quest is joining you on the quest and helping you complete it, as opposed to just sitting around town waiting for you to do it. So you never actually see other players in their like sort of natural form, so to speak. They're always role-playing another person, in like one of your townsfolk who's asked you to do something.
But can other players choose to attack you?
No.
Okay.
So the whole thing is completely PvE, and that's actually a really good question, because if you imagine that, like, say this treasure hunter-themed NPC said, like, go collect this thing for me, you get outside, you see him, and he just kills you.
Yeah.
Would kind of like
a lot of griefing happening.
Yeah, and it would kind of mess up the whole role play of like your townsfolk helping you out in the world. Whereas in Ashen, we've really gone for that like absolute the PvE co-op experience that you're always helping each other, and there are a whole bunch of mechanics that feed into this too.
So you create your character, and there's some customization, but the characters in this world don't have faces.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk about the idea behind that?
Yeah, and it's kind of good when things synergize, or you have multiple reasons, like strong reasons for why it is. One of the things that we do at our studio at Aurora 44 is we get like a really strong buy-off on the feel of a place that you want to be in, because we knew like we were making a big open world game. We wanted it to be a place people want to spend some time in. It just feels right. So the first thing that we did was work on environment art and not focus on the character necessarily. And once you do like a whole bunch of environment concepts, or even just like looking at the environment, and you see how environment artists would concept a character, they're not necessarily painting a detailed face and all that kind of stuff, because it kind of focuses the player's vision in on this like very interesting character, I suppose you could say, but it pulls away from looking at the environment. So in Ashen, when you kind of like get presented with this environment, there's a sort of very strong focus on outward looking and not necessarily focusing in on the player's face. But the other side of it is also just that when you meet another person in multiplayer, we didn't want to pre-program any sort of emotion on their face because we wanted you to judge them by their actions, not by what we have necessarily put on them.
Interesting. So how open is this game? Can you go anywhere from the beginning, or are you unlocking new areas?
Absolutely. Like I'm sure speedrunners are going to have do amazing things we've never intended. The whole game is completely open, seamlessly. You can run right from the start to the end of the game. Yeah.
And then, what do you think about the term Souls-like? Do you like that term? Is that fair for your game, or is it? It
is to some degree, you know, and we're absolutely humbled by even being compared to a massive franchise like Dark Souls. And as you can see here, we've got the stamina-based combat, which is the sort of stuff that Dark Souls really pioneered and brought into the forefront of our current generation. For us, we've put a lot of time into like just figuring out responsiveness, figuring out ways that can make this sort of combat accessible to players as well. And one of the big things that we have is because we've got such a PvE focus, and it's so easy for players to jump into the same game or like naturally flow into each other's games. It kind of softens off some of the hard edges of this kind of really grueling type of combat that makes the whole thing a lot more accessible, but at the same time, really skilled players can go and help out players that are less skilled. And that's sort of, you don't get as many of those roadblocks where you have to hit your head against it 100 times to then access more of the story. But that really hardcore challenge still exists within Ashen too.
Then how are you thinking and approaching difficulty?
That too is
like,
a very
are you trying to make a difficult game, or?
So for the sort of stamina-based genre in general, like they're all difficult, right? That's kind of like a thing that you could probably say about those sorts of games. And interestingly, in ours, if you play it like in co-op and you embrace playing with other players, it's probably a little bit more accessible than other games within the genre. But that's because we've balanced the whole game towards 2 players playing together. If you play solo, you can have an extremely hardcore experience, which is great for like the people who want that.
Well, how do you make, if you want to play solo, how do you make sure you do that? Just don't go online?
You can choose that in your settings. You can choose to not go online, but there are also, we've built it like right into the bones of the game. So we've got a perk system that allows you to sort of do, to customize your character in ways that also provide a bit of story as to like the background of who your character is and like how you've added things to your character. And there are these sort of like lone wolf perks that you can add onto your character too, which on purpose disconnect you from multiplayer. Like you can't get into multiplayer with other folks if you equip one of these. But like one of them, for example, where we've got features like there are dungeon doors in the game that you can only open with other players.
Interesting.
If you want access to those without having other players pop in, you can put in our you can choose to have one of our perks, which allows you to do that, and it disconnects you from multiplayer. So it's for people who really want to like cater their playstyle towards that and not need other players.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I'm fascinated by this sort of anonymous multiplayer situation you're setting up. If you are making yourself open to playing with other people, how many other people could be in your game world? So
you can only have one person at a time, and that's because like we've really focused it around that like one-on-one social interaction. Like a lot of our mechanics are built around that. But having said that, you can also choose to play with your friends, just in that there's also this kind of anonymous. You can have anonymous people weaving in and out of your game, but you can also choose to just set a group that just you and your friends can join, and it'll only be your friends who are weaving in and out of the world if you do want to play with specific people.
And do they just show up? Do they just like appear next to you, or do they come over the horizon? Like
you wouldn't necessarily see them show up, so we've made it kind of a seamless connection. But the way you'd say meet up with your friends would be like, hey, you know that tree we always meet up at? Let's just run there. And you'll both run there, and you'll both be there. So you don't have to do much to actually get it all working.
So what are we seeing here? We've just founded a town.
So this is your hometown that you kind of find, you set up. That's your first save stone, which are like your checkpoints in the game. And you can see here that we've got 2 NPCs that are going to start giving you quests. The interesting thing is, as you do quests for these guys, your town starts to build. So they each actually you start to see their houses building and kind of getting developed. And eventually this whole town becomes quite a developed medieval town from being this quite open area that it is now.
I see. So gameplay loop is you take a quest, go out, complete the quest, come back to town, improve your equipment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go back out and
so
do it
like,
again.
you know, if you grab a quest from one of these guys and you complete it, by completing their quests, like you'd come back to town and your town would have evolved a little bit, and you can kind of see how it kind of moves. You can definitely come back. You can get rewards for your quests. You can pick up perks. You can pick up things that, like by completing quests, you get more health, more stamina. And as you progress with your NPCs, they'll also start to uncover like crafting abilities that they have. So one of them could be like a potion crafter, or they could make new lanterns for you, or some of them actually craft talismans and relics, which are the items that you gather to yourself to equip perks.
And then along with your main quest, can we also expect side quests and other little business to do?
Absolutely. I think it's so important in a world as big as this that whole quest lines that focus more on kind of personal story as opposed to that bigger main quest line stuff that we do too. That kind of lets you dig a bit deeper into what it means to live in this world that has had darkness for so long, how it's affected those particular NPCs are kind of like our side quests. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your combat system?
Yeah,
we're seeing right here.
Yeah. So. What you're seeing here is, stamina-based combat. So if you run out of stamina, you can't do anything. So players need to kind of keep that in the back of their minds that like what you've done is it costs something as you do it, and you could be leaving yourself open if you're not aware of it. But at the same time, it's high risk, high reward. So if you pull something off that's spectacular, like you can like dodge just under someone's hit and then like crack them on the back of the head, and like you get like quite big feedback from that too, and that it doesn't take that many hits to get rid of your enemies, I suppose you could say. And what you're seeing here is actually one of our co-op mechanics, I guess you could say, where because it's a big open world, we've got climb mechanics where you can sort of hop up on ledges and stuff, but by having another person around you, you can kind of climb double the distance.
Right.
So just having another person kind of opens up a whole bunch of the world that players could even find stuff we didn't necessarily intend, which is kind of the magic.
Well, I like that you're building stuff into the game to sort of encourage people to take advantage of that multiplayer aspect, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What can you equip at the same time? Equip weapons, shield on both hands?
Sure, absolutely. So you can equip shields, you can equip clubs, axes, spears. The one thing we don't have in Ashen is swords. Interestingly. Yeah. And that was just because we wanted to make sure that our designers were really thinking through everything. We didn't want to go to something that was like a mainstay of the genre, so to speak, and that you have to look at like the animation patterns. You have to really think about how an axe behaves, or what are the different types of axes we could make as a studio to like to fulfill the needs of a whole wide range of players that want different animation types, different damage types, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Really kind of boiling it down to the ground and like thinking about everything from the ground up.
What about ranged weapons?
So yeah, ranged weapons. You've only got spears in the game, so you got throwing spears that you can throw. Interestingly, like another sort of open world mechanic that we have that you unlock about halfway through the game is that you start to be able to travel along these dark, shadowy paths in the world using your spears. So there are these kind of desiccated monk corpses that have kind of settled there by being extremely devout and kind of meditating in spot. And if you throw your spear at these guys and pierce their heart, you kind of get sucked along this path of shadow that brings you to them. And like interesting stuff that we've had is like you can travel like across whole like valleys, sitting on one cliff on the one side, and you see this little dot on the horizon, and you can kind of aim for them and get them if you do these massive long shots. You can also use it to kind of like bypass some dangerous enemies and stuff like that, or really engage with the open world where you can like, spear up to above a bunch of enemies, get this really interesting spot and like jump down on them, so like having multiple ways to tackle situations in an open world.
Is there also fast travel?
Absolutely. So from our 2015 trailer, a lot of players would have seen the giant sky whale-like creature that's in that, and you can't ride the big guy, but you do find a pup. You find the baby version of one of those, and they kind of bond with you because you save them from a bad guy that's holding them down, and once you've got them, they kind of fly you around the world as well. So there's sort of like a whole range of ways that you can get around the world quickly.
Very cool. Well, Ashen has been in development for a while. We're going to get to play it soon?
Absolutely. So Ashen will be coming out this year.
this year sometime on Xbox One and PC.
Yeah, we're also coming to Game Pass on Xbox, which is amazing for a game like this, where we really want to have like a good player saturation right at the start. Like players will have tons of people to play with, and it'll be an amazing experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming by the IGN stage.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Stay tuned. Much more to come from our final day of coverage here at E3 2018 after this.